physical world that we know, just goes through different transformations to achieve different functions. The next thing he does is he takes on what Mueller had said could not be done, that measure a nerve firing and making a muscle move. Too fast, can't do it, realm of God, vitalism. Helmholtz says, oh yeah? And what he does is he gets the leg of a frog, probably I haven't heard versions in high school, and he put some wires, because they did have a hint that part of what's moving through the body may be electrical. Put some wires on the upper thigh, and he has the wires going through what's like a galvanometer, kind of measuring the transmission of electrical pulses through the body. And then he hooks the other end of the wire down to the foot. And what he does is he stimulates the thigh, which we know makes the foot twitch, but now he can measure how long that takes, and he measures the time from the stimulation of the thigh to the twitch of the foot. Then he goes a little bit closer to the foot, moves closer to the knee, stimulates that, measures how long it takes for the foot to twitch. And by looking at the difference between the two sources of stimulation, he comes up with an estimate of about how quickly that message is being fired from the source of stimulation to the source or the location of reaction. He comes up, actually the number he gets is about, I think, 65 yards per second, very quick. So it happens very quick. But the point is, he measured it. He measured what could not be measured. He then went on and did a lot of research. This actually made him pretty famous. He went on to do work with humans, stimulating them, measuring the time. The other thing, and the thing that's important about this in psychology, though, not only does he demonstrate that you can measure reactions in a material way, that's kind of big for science, but for psychology, he isolates this thing that we know of as reaction time. By measuring reaction time, we can make guesses about what's going on in the body. And a little bit later on, in the next chapter, there's a guy who's going to use reaction time to make guesses about what goes on in the head as well. Okay? So, Helmholtz, not a vitalist, but a student of Mueller, not a vitalist, into the mechanistic approach. Writes a paper about the conservation of energy and measures the speed of a nerve firing in a frog. Okay? What else? The other thing that he does, let me see if I left anything else out. Okay. The other thing is that he actually stops looking at physiology, or at least nerve physiology, and he devotes a latter part of his life to the study of perception, how we see the world around us, which again isn't just like he wants to make glasses in the mall. He wants to actually kind of answer these questions. How do we see the world and what goes on around us? Now, one of the things that he was really fond of saying or noting was that when we look at the world and when we look at the eye and you consider the information that we pick up, it's never complete. It's always partial. Your eyes are in constant motion. In fact, if you actually stop them, you wouldn't see anything. So they have to move to pick up the light. But because they're moving, they're not getting a solid image of any one thing. They're getting little pieces. And somehow they're being put together. You don't see little pieces, you don't see little dots, but you do see one picture. So those were the things that he was interested in talking about. With regard to the physical environment, he just was always noting you can't see everything. Consider a cube. We know how many sides it has, but you can't turn it around fast enough so that you can see all the sides at once. You have to have something that goes on in your eye and your mind that allows you to appreciate the whole shape. So perception, when it occurs, is always incomplete. It's always fragmented. You're not seeing the world directly. You're seeing bits and pieces, and then you end up thinking you're seeing the world directly. But something's going on in the middle. The thing that goes on in the middle, he writes about in some detail. Again, something that's so popular, it's in every intro textbook, and they don't often mention his name. But he begins by separating the problem of perception into two pieces. The first thing we need to consider, he says, and you can see Kant in this, is sensation. How the eye works to pick up light and the sensory system. The second thing we didn't talk about is perception, how we perceive the world. We perceive the world, you know how we perceive the world in terms of bodies and shapes and all the stuff that's out there. But the sensory system is not picking up that information. So the sensory picks up information, it's fragmented, it's incomplete, but then the mind puts it together into whole pictures. And that's what he wants to explain. Now, in the book, and the thing you should brush up on, is he talks a bit about the structure of the eye. And for the most part, you don't have to know the details, all the details of the eye. But pretty much it's like a camera. If you just talk about the eye from a physiological point of view, it's like a camera. You have this round object, and there's fluid in it, and there's a lens on one end, and light from the world comes into the lens, right? So you get all this light concentrating, going through the eyeball. And what's most important about the eye, because it will be on the test, is the retina in the back of the eye, right flat on the back side of the eyeball. That is basically part of the nervous system that's picking up light energy and transforming the energy into nerve impulses, which will then travel to the brain. So the retina is crucial. But the retina is also part of the problem because it's flat. So it picks up light and you have one flat surface on the back of your eye. The world isn't flat. So how does it transform the flat retina into a three-dimensional world? So when I see this, it doesn't look like you're all smashed on a wall. It looks like you're in a classroom with people in the back, people in the front. That can't happen on the retina. The retina distorts it and it's flat, so it's flat. The other thing the retina does is it's basically a round surface and it's made up of neurons, sensory neurons, the dendrites that pick up the information. And they all bundle together and they form at the back of the retina what's called the optic nerve. And it shoots out of your eyeball and goes under your brain and connects to the back of your brain in the area that you now all know as the occipital lobe because of the test, right? So, where all the nerves bundle together, there's a blind spot. You can't see. You're not even getting a full picture on the circle that's there. And he even tells you in the book to how to do a little trick where you cover one eye, and as you move an object close, you'll see it kind of shift over. I never could do that, but you can give it a try. But usually where it shifts, that's where you hit the blind spot. The other thing is the retina is small, the world is big. So, you know, if just looking at the physiology of the eye and the sensory system, there's a lot of distortions, a lot of mistakes. It's just simply wrong to think that we see the world as it is, because it has to, what we see has to be transformed by the structure of the eye. Okay? So that's one thing. The other thing he talks about is the nature of light, which is also a source of distortion. We know that light comes in and that light is made up of different wavelengths, and if you vary the wavelengths, you see different colors. There's a famous experiment with Newton, where he had a white light coming into his window. He took a prism, you know, one of the little glass triangle things. The light went through the prism. Guess what he saw? The light fanned out into a little rainbow. It's known as the solar spectrum. And what you see is from the white light, it contains all different colors that we normally see in the world around us. But basically, that's a result of the unpacking of the white light. Newton took another prism at the other end. So we had the white light going in, going through the prism, fanning out, then going through another prism, and guess what? All those colors turned into white light again. Pretty conclusive evidence that light has a lot of information in it, but it's not crystal clear, it's not direct, and you can play games with it. So one of the things he starts to talk about when he talks about light is the way that can distort us. One of the other things that is important with light and how we pick it up is that when we see light, we don't just see the light that we're interested in. In fact, the retina is designed so that the fovea, the area in the middle, picks up most of the light. It allows us to see very clearly. And that clear sight is about, if you stick your hand out and look at your thumb. Everything else is being picked up around the fovea, and is usually, the further out it gets, the more blurred it gets. So picking up the light, the eye is distorting it, sensory organ. The light itself is malleable and made up of many components. One of the things that also happens is that picking up any kind of information from the world, let's stick with light now, is all